This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy that you're here. I hope that y'all are enjoying these interviews as much as I'm enjoying interviewing such spectacular people with so many great stories, so much good perspective, and so much encouragement that you're going to find a way to thrive in the NICU. You're going to find a way to get the resources that you need, whether your baby leaves the NICU or whether your baby doesn't leave the NICU. My hope is that each one of these episodes gives you one more tool in your tool belt to be able to love your baby the best way you can. And I think today's guest is going to help us do that. We all know that reading is important to children and reading in general. I think I picked that habit back up over the summer and plowed through like 30 books. So I decided it might be good to talk to somebody that can help us share with maybe siblings at home what's going on with baby brother or baby sister, and then some good reading resources for you as a parent that you can help be the best parent that you can be to your sweet baby. So I have this, I think she's a unicorn, y'all. She's a neonatologist and she's a children's author. I don't know that I have ever heard of that combination before. And she's also, I found out, an illustrator. So let me introduce her, and then that way we can chat, because I have no doubt that this interview is going to be great. Dr. Jenny Koo is a board-certified neonatologist affiliated with Sharp Mary Birch Hospital for Women and Newborns in San Diego, California. Dr. Koo's interest lies in cardiovascular health of newborns, and she's a part of the Sharp Mary Birch Neonatal Research Institute. Dr. Koo is passionate about family-centered care, praise the Lord, me too, and ensuring that the entire family unit, not solely the neonate, is cared for and supported throughout their NICU journey. As a hobby, Dr. Koo enjoys drawing, and she's authored not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 children's books. So let's chat. Well, I'm super happy to have you here on the podcast, Dr. Koo. I love that you're dressed as a doctor. You play one by day, but you're a mom and a children's author by night. So I would love to know, we'll dive into the authorship in just a minute, but why, of all the specialties, why neonatology?
That's such a great question. Honestly, I feel like throughout training and medical school and residency, I've kept an open mind to everything because I never could decide what I liked the most. And I think it was through discovery that I landed in NICU. First of all, I found that I loved kids because they're such a vulnerable population that needs a voice for them. And within pediatrics, I leaned towards higher acuity, meaning that, kids who are sicker in the ICU. And so it narrowed me down to NICU PICU. Now, NICU is super special because not only do you get the babies who are really sick, but you follow them throughout a very long course until they get to go home. And you don't get that with PICU because you get the babies better, you get the kids better, and they go to the hospitalist floor. So you never get that full journey that you get to follow a baby or a child or a family through the entire course and journey. And so NICU is just really such a special place for that very reason. I have a special place in my heart for being able to longitudinally follow a family.
Well, this is what makes you a good neonatologist. We have a really special relationship with all the people that served our family when our son was in the NICU. And I think you're right. It's really fun when we go back for reunions and they all say, well, we recognize them by the moms and the dads' faces because they change and grow so much.
Yeah.
But I love that the continuity of care was what drew you to the NICU. So I mentioned in the intro that you're a NICU doctor or neonatologist by day, but you're also a mom and most recently an author. I know this is your 4th children's book. So maybe give us an idea of what prompted you to write the book that you wrote specifically about the NICU. I know your other 3 books are definitely children's books, but not necessarily centered on the NICU.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, going back to my training days, I had a family that I took care of with twin babies, and one twin unfortunately did not make it. And the family was grieving, the parents were grieving, and they have two small children at home, but old enough to understand that something was not right, and old enough to understand that they should have two baby siblings, not one. And so it was hard enough for the mom and dad to cope with the loss of one of their babies, let alone trying to explain things to their children. Now, this was before COVID, when they were able to bring their children near the unit, and I was able to talk to them directly. So I had the opportunity to talk to them, the children, the siblings, and try to explain to them in non threatening, non medical terms what exactly is happening with their baby siblings. And so it was really eye opening to see how precocious some children can be, but also how information leavened the burden, not only on the parents, but also on the siblings too, because while they were allowed in the hospital, they weren't allowed into the unit at the
Right.
time. And all they had were photos and videos to go off of. And so there was a lot of unknowns. And not knowing was actually what made them most fearful. In fact, they asked me, so first baby, one of our baby siblings went to heaven. Is the same thing going to happen to our other baby sibling?
Mm.
And so that unknown and that uncertainty was what drove a lot of their anxieties and their fears. And so I walked them through very basic things about preterm baby care, how we should be expecting babies to be in the hospital for some time, but they can continue supporting babies by writing them letters or recording their voices. And most importantly, I had to explain to them why mommy and daddy are not going to be home a lot. Because I think that a big part of being a NICU sibling is having to share their parents' time with us in the NICU.
My other 4 children who were at home when our son was in the NICU would absolutely agree with you that it's difficult to understand why mom and dad are gone,
Hmm.
or the people that are taking care of the baby, and then why there's you say you had a baby, but the baby's not here. I distinctly remember, at one point, my other children seeing Luke, their brother, for the first time, like, through a glass window. That was the
Oh.
soonest. Yeah, so it's hard to be in that space. So, I'm curious when you found the time because I'm listening to you. You have I know that neonatologist hours are not always normal hours, like they're not banker's
Hmm.
hours. So
Yeah.
how did you find the time to be an excellent doctor to your patients, but then develop this really excellent resource for families?
I love just sketching and doodling. I'm not necessarily like a professional artist by any means, but I got an iPad and discovered that drawing on an iPad is really easy. It doesn't have to be stored like paper doesn't have to be stored anywhere. I can erase easily. And so I just developed this kind of hobby of digital art. And so it started off with a couple of figures here and there. Like if I were giving a medical talk, for instance, a lot of people would use stock photos or ask other medical illustrators to illustrate things for them. So I started then just creating my own figures, like diagrams of babies. And this is what I'm doing with X clinical trial. And from there, I started just doodling for fun. And my husband was like, "Hey, you like to doodle? That's kind of cute. Do you want to write a children's book?" I joke about this, but it's totally true. My husband routinely tries to monetize on my hobbies, um, and he more or less said that like, "Hey, can you turn your hobby into something that's like real?" And so that's where the other three children's book actually spawned from, was this turning my hobby into something tangible and shareable, is what he likes to say. So those books are more about just like a pig and a bunny going on these traveling adventures. It happened right around the time of COVID, and so it was great because then children get to travel around the world through Hamilton and Eleanor, a pig and a bunny. So now coming back to this, it was that discovery of my hobby, my new hobby of doodling on an iPad, that I was like, oh, maybe I can actually take then my new children's book series, adapt Hammy and Ellie, who are now established characters in my children's book series, and have them introduce the NICU to baby Chloe, to Chloe, who has a baby brother in the NICU. And this idea just spawned and just kind of ran with it.
So for people that are watching this on YouTube, they can see the cover of that book. Am I hearing that right? That you illustrated the book and you wrote the book?
Yes, yes.
Look at oh my gosh, you really are talented. That's amazing. Yeah, so if you can't see it, which we'll make sure that we share that on social media, that's
Hmm.
really impressive. So your other 3 books people can find on Amazon. I know that this book
Hmm.
is particular to your specific NICU in San
Hmm.
Diego. So maybe tell us a little bit about some of the themes and some of the analogies that you use in the book to sort of explain to kids who the NICU and maybe even hospitals in general feel like a very foreign place.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first and foremost, we start by explaining to Chloe, the little girl whose baby brother's in the NICU, why a baby would be in the NICU. And we talk a little bit about prematurity and why he's not in mommy's belly or in the crib. Oh, sorry, this blur thing
No,
is
you're
not
good.
working well.
It's all right.
Um, and we talk a little bit about comparing fetus sizes to different fruits and vegetables. And so analogies, well, mainly, I think the scariest thing about the NICU are all the machines and the alarms and the beepings. So a lot of my analogies are trying to explain what those machines do. I have a page here of the machines being literal monsters, being very threatening appearing. Um, and I could send you actual
Oh,
like
I would love that.
pictures.
Yeah. That
So
way we
yeah, that
can
way you
share
could
that.
post it better.
Wonderful.
But for example, oxygen through a CPAP mask or nasal cannula or even an ET tube, an endotracheal tube, is like a baby who is snorkeling underwater and needs oxygen to help them breathe. So I use that analogy. And there's a picture of Hammy and Ellie, the pig and the bunny, with Chloe swimming with a bunch of babies underwater.
Oh, how
Some have
sweet.
nasal cannulas, some have CPAP masks, one has an ET tube in. I also liken things like IVs and NG tubes to being like you're charging a phone up. You're charging the battery. So baby is a battery, and we need to charge them up. And so that's what the nutrition we're providing is like. We're just charging baby up. One of my favorites is actually the analogy of the isolettes being a little spaceship because it's a little clear box. And so
I
there's
see
there's
that.
literally a baby and an isolette in space. Um, and that really all these machines are here to just help and not to be scary. The first part of the book is a narrative. It's a story about Chloe and her baby brother. But the second part of the book goes into a little bit more details about all the machines and stuff. I call it the picture glossary. It's not an actual glossary in that I'm listing a term and then the definition, but it just goes through common things like the machines. And I even have a page with baby's anatomy and the different parts of the body and what they do. There we go.
Oh, that's perfect.
Um, so in some ways, I designed it this way so that the first half of the book is really it rhymes too. It's almost like a poem, almost kind of Dr. Seuss-esque. The first half of the book is for the younger population who just wants to know like a story. The latter half of the book is for the older siblings who really want to delve into a little bit more of the details. So
That
yeah.
sounds like such an amazing resource. So I know that it's specific to your hospital. So tell us a little bit about the grant that you received to write that book.
Thank you. So I was very fortunate and very grateful for the Little Giraffe Foundation. They provided a grant to help me publish this prototype. I call this a prototype because there's much improvement to be made. I would like to broaden the story to encompass not only premature babies, but all babies who come to the NICU and need our help. And so with this prototype, it is limited to distribution within the hospital that I work for because I got a grant to give them to families for free. I'm hoping that as the families give me feedback, I can make edits, make it better, make it more all inclusive, and start distributing it to other NICUs. Ultimately, my goal is that this book should never cost a NICU family any money. I just don't feel like it's right for this book to cost anyone anything. I'm hoping to reach out to NICUs to maybe purchase it and pay the fee that it costs to print. I'm not looking to make a profit, but so that NICUs can purchase these books and distribute it for free to their families. Or, maybe I can take advantage of my other children's books and anyone who purchases like Tom's shoes or these other
Yeah, yeah,
things
yeah.
where you buy a copy and you're actually inadvertently like donating one to another family. So someone can buy my non-NICU books off Amazon, for instance, and that could maybe contribute to a donation towards gifting a book to a NICU family in need.
Well, it looks
I'm
like an amazing
imagining
resource. I mean, I think
that.
that no, I mean, I think that certainly the families at your hospital in San Diego are absolutely the beneficiaries of that. But I also believe that it's really important that we think about what does a NICU stay and how does that affect siblings at home. I think that
Hmm.
sometimes we forget, we remember the mom, we sometimes remember the dad, but we often
Yeah.
forget about the siblings. And I think the destigmatizing of the scary things can make it feel
Yeah.
easier to process, not so overwhelming, and take this really hard thing and make it something that they can break
Mhm.
it down into something that they can understand. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support, enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive. I'm curious, so you're a mom now. So how did being a
Mhm.
mom influence you writing this book, but how does it influence you being a neonatologist to other people's babies now that you're a mother yourself?
It's crazy. I thought I knew what it meant to love a baby, but
Oh,
it's you never know until it's like you experience it yourself. And I am very fortunate to have a very healthy term baby who did not need the services of the NICU, but did require a little bit of resuscitation in the beginning. And, being a neonatologist, knowing a little bit too much, my
mhm,
brain went straight to the worst case scenarios as
right.
everything was happening. Even during fetal monitoring around the time of delivery, I was like, that's a D cell. That's a D cell.
You just
When is
couldn't
someone
turn
going
it
to run
off,
into
could
my
you?
room? Yeah, nope. But yes, so it has really changed how I empathize with families, because even with a healthy term baby, the slightest things just shot me into next level anxiety. Or I was always worried. I just poured my heart and soul into my baby girl. And so I can only imagine what it must be like to have to go through a NICU journey while also dealing with all the postpartum hormones. That is no joke. Um, but yeah, like it's that kind of love is just indescribable. I can't even put into words how it's changed my view of parenthood. And so now thinking about all the families and the strength that they have to make it through a NICU course, um, and for some families to have to endure a NICU course but not be able to bring their baby home, it just touches me so much. So I think changed. It doesn't change my clinical practice as much per se, but I think it's making me a lot more mindful of everything that happens in the NICU matters and leaves a lasting impact on families. Whether it's even if it's like, as a neonatologist, we consider the most acute babies as being the very critically ill ones, the ones on ventilators, the extremely preterm babies. Sometimes we have a baby who's in the NICU for a shorter period of time, who might just need a little bit of assistance with eating better, or a little bit of assistance with breathing in the beginning because they have wet lungs and they just need a day or two of oxygen. As a neonatologist, pre-baby, me personally, neo and not a mom yet, I didn't quite understand why it was so difficult for people to understand a short NICU stay and that it's going to be fine, it's going to be okay, your baby's going to go home and be healthy. But gosh, after having a baby of my own, just even thinking about the possibility of her being not healthy, and she was completely fine,
Yeah.
just took me to the next level. So I'm hoping to be more mindful of the families who don't necessarily have a very critically ill baby, but any NICU stay can be traumatizing. And that's something that I had to learn after becoming a mom.
Yeah, I think most NICU parents listening to this would say every NICU stay is traumatizing, whether it's
Yeah.
just a few days or many, many months. And like you said,
Yeah.
some babies leave the NICU and some babies don't. I'm curious, Dr. Koo, what some of the resources are that you give to parents. I know social work has a vast plethora of things that they work with families, of giving
Hmm.
them resources, access to
Hmm.
services. But what are some things as a neonatologist and now an author that you think are good resources for families to utilize that kind of help their
Hmm.
siblings of those families at home sort of process the NICU stay and then help those families sort of
Hmm.
come out of the trauma of the NICU?
Yeah. I'm super proud to be part of the Sharp Mary Birch Hospital system or just the Sharp healthcare system because I feel like they've been very progressive in the last couple of years in developing more and more of these resources that you mentioned. First and foremost, all three of our units have cameras on these babies, and I know that that's a luxury that not all units have, and so family members, parents, siblings can watch the baby through the camera, even if they can't come in to see them for themselves. And this also helps parents who, like, for instance, mom is at home, but she needs to pump, and her supply is boosted by just having real time video access to her baby. We're also developing and building our NICU specific family advisory, family parents partnership council. And so we're eliciting feedback from family members, moms and dads, to try to see how we can better support. And as I mentioned before, we're building resources. And so we've been creating more and more pamphlets, infographics, things that are tangible on top of just our verbal reassurance and verbal updates. So yeah, we're still building them, but they're there.
Well, I love that you mentioned the advisory board. I know that's something that we were in a family centered care focused NICU. I know not all of them are like that, but I know there are more and more hospitals who are starting to look at feedback from moms and dads. What was your experience like? Or I remember one of the meetings that we had, they put the board up that they have on the wall that says, like, your baby's name and all these things, and we were like, you should make this section bigger because we need more space to read this or whatever. And it was nice to be asked, what can we do better? And I know that sometimes parents, having been through something like that, can be valuable resources. So if you're a parent listening to this, ask your hospital if they have an advisory council. I think that's a good tip to parents, that once you're past a few months or maybe even a year or so down the road, that you might be able to help other parents. I love that y'all do that. So I'm curious, do you have any favorite, like, children's authors that you think are just exceptional? That I know reading to our NICU babies, reading to babies in general is awesome, but reading to NICU babies especially. So I'm curious
Mhm.
what books you would recommend.
You know, any books, any and all books. And the reason why I'm having trouble really pinpointing a specific author is because for at least my own baby, I've been seeking bilingual books for her. And so it's going to be hard for me to recommend Chinese books on this podcast. It's not going to be very applicable to your wider audience. But honestly, any and all books. There are no bad books out there because the power of meaningful language to a baby's neurodevelopment is insurmountable. And um, and we have to keep in mind that NICU babies go through a lot of ambient noises that are noxious and may not be always positive. But it's also not good to put them in an environment that is completely devoid of all sounds. So reading is a very meaningful way of not only allowing the baby to hear. Oftentimes the parent's voice when it's the parent reading to them, and they know that voice from when they were in utero. The sense of hearing can begin as early in the second trimester or mid second
Wow.
trimester. And so and so not only are they hearing their parents' voices, but they're also hearing meaningful words. And we know that words can help a very rapidly growing brain develop better. So for that reason, I don't have any specific authors per se. There are those books that are classics. Everyone can just name them. I'm not going to even plug those here because I know those books are doing fine. There are no wrong books. Just pick up a book and go. And I encourage any family members who are listening or any NICU providers who are listening, if there is not already a NICU library available in each unit, consider doing that. It's not hard to get donations of books, board books that are easy to wipe down between uses. That way, parents, even if they cannot access brand new books for their own babies, they can borrow one as they walk into the NICU to visit their baby for the day. Pick one up right by the entryway and just read.
That's great. Well, I'm actually glad that you said bilingual books. I know that the plethora of books, certainly since our son was in the NICU 13 years ago to today, there are so many more books where kids can see and parents can see themselves in the characters that didn't exist before. So I think that you're right. There are a lot of really good resources out there, and I love that you're providing a resource specifically though for siblings to show them this beautiful place where you guys do amazing work with NICU babies and take some of the fear and the trauma out of that and make it easy to understand. So it's such an awesome resource. I just have one last question. I know you got to get back to
Yeah.
work, but if a mom or a dad is listening to this and feeling overwhelmed in the NICU, as a neonatologist, what would be your best advice to them?
Empower yourself with knowledge. I think that a NICU um, is scary and daunting because there's so much unknowns, and there's the learning curve is so steep that if a family member were to feel empowered by knowing exactly what that means or what that machine does, or what the care is for their baby, and most importantly, I want families to feel like they're part of the care team and not just bystanders. I think that is probably the best way to overcome fear. Now, that comes at a different time for every family. For some families, they do need to take a step back and just be the passenger in the beginning until they absorb things. But once they are ready, they should feel like it is okay to step in. Ask for things like, when is it appropriate to do skin to skin? When can I do the first diaper change? Can I give my baby her first bath? These are all things that parents should feel empowered to ask and advocate for.
It's excellent advice and a really good way to end it. Thank you so much, Dr. Koo.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time.
Well, y'all, wasn't she just delightful? I thought Dr. Koo was such a great guest. I really enjoyed visiting with her. And y'all, seriously, she is a neonatologist and an author. And I should have added, and an illustrator and also a mom. I mean, how many more titles can you get? I love it. She's super talented. So today's 2-minute take, besides me being completely enamored with how many talents that she has and so well that she is sharing them with the world, is the importance of reading to your baby. No matter what book you picked up, she reminded us it doesn't matter what book you pick up, whatever is important to your family, whatever books that you love, whatever authors are like your jam, sitting down, taking a couple of seconds, taking a breath, setting aside the phone calls that you got to make to the insurance company or the errands that you have to run to go get the medical supplies, that you can take a deep breath and you can sit down and you can read to your baby. They just want to hear your voice, y'all. And what a great reminder that it's you that they want. And it's also a good reminder, moms, dads, caregivers, it's okay to take a break and love on your baby and read them a book, no matter which one it is. And if you are a NICU specialist, neonatologist, NICU nurse, whatever, and you're listening to this podcast, I really hope that if you do not currently have a NICU library, that you make that happen, because what a great resource for parents. I remember I certainly didn't want to read Facebook to my son whenever we were in the NICU, but I wanted to read him some books. And I remember we had this great little group of women that would come around and like have this basket of books, and they would let us choose one and we got to take it home. But what a great resource it would have been to have had a NICU library in the NICU. So if you're listening and you don't have a NICU library and you're in a NICU and you're a specialist and you can make that happen, make it happen. I look forward to visiting with y'all next week. But until then, go read to your baby, y'all. See you next time. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you love today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.